to our community forum. I'm so excited to be hosting. This is Samantha Stone, hosted today in Woburn. We are so excited to see many of your faces here today, or at least your names if you're not on camera. We welcome you to pop camera on if you want, but you're also welcome to keep it off. Ellen Crowley is here with me, and we have a lot of wonderful questions that have come in advance, and I also hope that you will generously use the chat feature, which is in the bottom of the Zoom, so that you can ask additional questions and participate in tonight's conversation. We are recording this so that this can be broadcast across multiple channels to make sure as many people can participate and learn from the forum as possible. Ellen has not seen any of the questions that have come in, so she's so generously allowed us to ask anything that we want. However, we do have some questions that are similar, so I will likely paraphrase some of your questions and group them together just to make sure that we can get through as much content as possible. With that, Ellen, I'd like to turn it over to you to welcome everyone. And just a reminder, you have the ability to ask questions in the chat at any time. I'm going to read questions. We're not going to do it verbally, just to make sure that the recording is clear and we make sure we don't have any background noise, but please feel free to use that chat feature generously.
I couldn't be more pleased to be here tonight. Again, I'm Ellen Crowley, and I'm just so grateful for all the support of coming on my question and answer forum. This is a huge election. It has huge repercussions. This could be a groundbreaking election for all of us. And I'm truly excited and positive for creating a new Woburn and a new positive vision for Woburn. So that being said, I'm very eager to answer questions. Again, I don't know what they are, so I'm going to be answering from the top of my head in full transparency as much as possible. So here we go.
Well,
question one.
Thank you for doing that. I'm actually going to start tonight with a question that's already come in with our chat. And the question is about regional transportation for Woburn residents. We've had some changes in transportation. We all know if you don't have a car, kind of hard to get a lot around. What do you think we should be doing or foresee being able to do to help support residents who need more public transportation to get around?
So yes, I think that Woburn should have more intercity transportation. And my plan for that would be to collaborate with Stoneham, Reading, Wakefield, Lexington, Winchester to see if there's some sort of regional task force that we could create to try to look at transportation on a global level with the other surrounding districts. So I have been, teasing around some ideas in this regard, but I do see this as maybe wasn't such an issue last year during COVID, but it certainly is now something that we should be looking at, because not only does it allow for more mobility for people to get out there, it also helps with the environment. And so if we have more public transportation, we have less cars. And I think I want to answer as many questions as possible. I could go on, but I'll leave it at that.
Well, thank you for that, Ellen, and I appreciate it. I'll be our timekeeper tonight. Make sure we use this time together as wisely as possible. I actually spent some time with some young voters, and I'm lucky enough to have some young adults in my family and their poor friends as I've been sort of hounding them for questions and trying to get a feel for what's important to them. And one thing bumbled up time and time again. This particular question came from my 19-year-old son, who is an active voter. And he wants to, he is very interested in staying in Woburn in the community. But, envisioning buying a house here right now feels really hard. First-time home buyers, certainly not just for young people, but across the board, it's a challenge. So I would love to understand from your perspective what we can do to support first-time home buyers and make it a place that our families and friends who want to come here can afford to do so.
Yes. Affordable first-time home buyer programs. Yes, across the board. Yes, as much as possible. Finding a community block grant to support an endeavor to help people either A, with down payment assistance, like let's just throw it out there. There are grants that help with down payments, or two, just bringing in CHAPA, remember the name, nonprofits that do help people buy homes for the first time. Yes, the more we have people buying homes, the more we develop a tax base, the more we stabilize our school systems, and the more we get people into developing long-term wealth. Home ownership is the key to wealth, the key to ending poverty, and it's a way to grow your assets. So we should be doing this. In fact, in the 2016 housing production plan that was approved by the state said, Woburn, focus on home buyer programs, please, because you are in the perfect area. You're in the middle of two highways. You have a diverse population. Yes, I just can't even stress enough how important it is to support these programs. Not to mention, if we diversify the home ownership in the city, what rewards we will get for all people of all ages, all generations being able to buy homes. We will all win as a community.
So thank you for that answer. I want to keep my baby close to me. So whether they do or not, it's definitely something I'm selfishly interested in. But let's talk for a minute about affordable housing in general. We got lots of questions that came in that talked about not just first-time home buyers, although that is certainly a community, but maybe other portions of keeping the community affordable overall. What are things that we can do in general to make sure that funding is available that we talked about, but homes are priced in a way and living here is priced in a way that makes it an attractive place?
So housing, is one of my passions. So I was a eviction prevention attorney. And so I have been in cities that have done affordable housing very well. And there has to be so your question is, how can we support a plan for affordable housing? Well, you have to have different methods. First, you could loosen zoning laws. So you allow people to build on their homes, right? So then you're supporting family members living with family, boom. Sometimes you can develop subsidized housing incentives so that landlords accept Section 8 vouchers. Like that is a way to increase affordable housing. Increase like the aforementioned home buyer programs. If we get more people to buy homes, then we're also creating a competition in the market to lower house prices. But you can't just do one thing. Just giving away Woburn to developers, not going to be good. Not a good idea. We need to look at different plans. And I don't want to go down the strategic plan route because I'm trying not to answer all questions, but I'm going to have a plan for that. But we have to study poverty. We have to study housing needs before we talk about what the right plan is for Woburn. Framingham, for instance, did some incentive in helping folks remodel their homes so that they were able to build on their homes. Fitchburg has a whole community. They're very much like Woburn socioeconomically. They did a whole thing with a community development and home buyer program. And then you have other cities that are working with the state to build actually more housing, subsidized housing, but we seem to have a good inventory of that. So again, I love everything about affordable housing. It's the key to equality. It's the key to diversity. It's the key to equity. And so I can't wait to get my hands in a good affordable housing plan.
So I just want to point out the fact that while I have been incredibly animated, you cannot see me if in the recording. Only the live audience can see me. Ellen and I are in the same room. And if I unmute myself, you will hear all kinds of crazy backup noises. So those of you who are here live, you get to see my smiling face. For those of you who are seeing the recording, I apologize that you won't quite be able to see me, but that doesn't matter because really we're here to hear Ellen's point of view and answer your questions. But I wanted to acknowledge that you might not be seeing me and it might feel a little strange to see a voice from away. I want to talk, one more question about housing. As you were talking, there's many communities in which housing is a challenge. For our senior community, there are long wait lists for senior housing in Woburn. And I don't know that there's a different answer than what you've been talking about, but are there programs and opportunities to leverage senior housing in nearby communities or any other things that you might want to add specific to that community? So yeah, what I mentioned before was Woburn's housing production plan, and one need that popped up was an elder. We have
poverty level in the elder population. That's important to look at. And I just think we need to invest in elder subsidized housing. And that's the answer to that. We should be supporting elders, however, and staying in their own homes and finding ways to educate them on reverse mortgages or ways to keep their income stable so they're able to stay in their homes if that's their choice, connecting them to in-home nursing services, which are very difficult to get, but they are possible through Mass Health, and making sure that if an elderly person, the goal is to remain in their home, that we also have ways through the senior center, through outreach, that they are able to get those resources. So again, it's a multi-dimensional problem, but I do believe generally in subsidized elderly housing.
Thanks, Ellen. I want to talk about, switch gears a little bit away from housing. We've had a number of questions that come in when we talk about mental health and physical health of our community and of our residents. And this has been it's always a challenge, but a really rough year. We often think of these things for younger people through the school system, but we also have Woburn Recreation. What are the places across the city that should be coming together to make sure that residents have great opportunities to get out there and stay healthy and active, whether they're young or, whether they're retired folks?
So again, we need to come together in a city and decide what the city needs to promote wellness. And we need to develop task force that are going to target breaking isolation patterns. And we need to just get together and have a conversation about it. But as a community, for too long, we've been, well, what is that going to cost? We can't ask for that. That's going to be too much money, and he'll never agree to that, and they'll never agree to that, and that's just crazy. So we just need to break that pattern and really innovate new ideas as to how we're going to develop new programming to meet the needs of 2021. Just off the top of my head, we have 3 entry points of people. We have the library, we have the senior center, we have recreation, where they're actually interacting with the people in Woburn. And so I think looking at those departments would be my starting point.
So one of the things that a couple people have raised in their questions is around inclusivity in the programs that we run. Certainly this has come up in the context of Woburn Recreation, but it includes things like our playgrounds as well. We today haven't always served everyone with all different types of abilities and disabilities. What should we taking into account to make Woburn as inclusive as possible?
Well, first we have to have the Human Rights Commission actually meet and not give them $1 in the budget. And so we actually need to have a commission that's dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I think is the Human Rights Commission. Having one and not actually doing anything is not helping anybody. When we talk about, again, inclusivity is a top-down thing. You need to start with everything. You really need to look at all of the different departments and determine how we can make Woburn more inclusive. And so it really just starts with ways, even the little things that we can do to create more inclusion, all the way up to actual structured plans to promote diversity and inclusion. For instance, it starts with our sidewalks. Can everybody use our sidewalks? It's as simple as that. Everybody in Woburn should be able to use our sidewalks. And I honestly think that the city should take a playbook from the school department, because the school department fuels on equity, diversion, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's what we do. We promote that as an environment, and not just, the city being over here and the school department over here. One way is to truly collaborate in that regard and just set like a precedent. This is what an equitable city looks like, and then make action steps to get there.
Excellent. Thank you for answering that question. I want to talk a little bit about there's been a couple questions that have come in around law enforcement and how we police in our city. I know when we spoke a week or so ago, you talked about being a strong supporter and advocate for the police department. Why don't you talk a little bit about that and some of the ways that we can enhance and support policing as you envision it in the future Woburn?
So when I envision good policing, I think of community-based community-based aspects in the community that prevent crime. So we need to address things like poverty, mental health issues and substance abuse, access to education, homelessness. We need to look at the social pressures that may lead to risk that leads to crime. So we need, if anything, we need to increase the funding of the police department to include a diverse level of folks in the police department that help deal with human relations issues and social workers. So I love the idea of a domestic violence advocate being in the police department and an advocate for children, and having a task force to address violence against women and children in the city, and really tackle ways in which we could alleviate those stressors. The school department has excellent data on how we can keep kids safe and how we can, I'll just say this, that we need to program for out of school time, because after school and before school may be risk factors for kids to get in trouble. So when we think about youth, we need to think about ways in which we can keep youth safe. And then when we think about adults, we need to think about social services. So it's not just public safety and over policing things, looking at the foundations of what creates a more risky Woburn. And I will say that I did notice that, things like police getting bulletproof vests and things like that just don't get done in Woburn, and there seems to be kicked down the road. They were part of a capital plan in 2017, and now they were pushed down the line, and now they're in a strategic capital plan for 2020 to 2024. And I think police need bulletproof vests and things like that. So I just want to make sure that police are getting their basic needs, but we're addressing public safety on a larger level as well.
Excellent. When we talk about sort of capital investments and things like that, one of the things is we've had some big capital projects across the city. We've had new schools, we've had the new fire department, which is just starting off, but will be with us soon. But there are other big capital projects like taking down some old buildings and creating the open space that we have. And while there has been some very early moves, and in some cases, like the Clinton School, they've even been funded to take down, we seem to take a very, very long time. And even when we talk about it as a city, we talk about 3, 4, 5 years out. What is that normal? Or are there more that we can do as a city to progress things more quickly?
So if the mayor asked for funding for a capital plan to demolish the Plimpton, then he should demolish the Plimpton. If for whatever reason something arises in the way, then he needs to create a timeline of when it's going to be done. When you look at Woburn's capital planning, it's $50,000 to purchase, $60,000 purchase heating improvement at the Council on Aging. And so you're like, wow, that's great, $60,000 to improve the heating. And then does it ever get done? No, it just seems to roll down the line. And there's never any transparency as to what is getting done and what's not getting done. But the Plimpton, we all can see, is not getting done. So I'm an elected official, and I have no idea why that building is still there. And I am an elected official, and I do not know why the Herald, well, maybe the Herald is kind of new, but why that is still there. There's no transparency, there's no explanation. And so the public is just left wondering what is going on. And it's just not good communication. If for whatever reason there are things getting in the way of getting this thing done, then just tell people, just communicate and say, look, just couldn't get to it this year. But instead, everyone is left in the dark. And that is the core principle and the frustration that people feel from this administration.
So we're going to switch gears a little bit again on you. And I had a lot of questions that came in to start with the word traffic. I probably don't need to add anything else to that. But we've certainly seen, we are at the crossroads of intersections of major highways. We are a cut through for many people, and we are just a growing community that has more residents. What can and should Woburn do to help maintain reasonable traffic?
Yes, and I think this is a great question. So I was poking around today, and I'm looking at comparing capital plans that the mayor had in 17 and the mayor has now, and I noticed that there was a study that was funded for traffic and prohibiting trucks in certain streets, and I don't know where that is. So first, I want to know where that study is, and then if we didn't go through with that study, because I can't find it anywhere, and I apologize if I'm misspeaking, and it's actually out there. But we need to do a comprehensive study on traffic and figure out where we can alleviate it. But as I said before, the public transportation issue seems like a viable solution. But sometimes, like in Woburn, oh well, traffic is, yeah, we're getting all this new development, there's going to be more traffic, but and I would like to see more active, engaging long-term plans to actually alleviate the annoyance that traffic creates, and just admit it that we're a very highly trafficked, I don't know if that's a great word, highly busy city.
We're probably not highly trafficked, or at least let's hope not.
We're creating businesses that's creating traffic. That's a good thing. Yay. But again, I'm just going to say this because this is kind of like the thing that I say. All of this growth is awesome, prosperous, and great. And wow, look at us. We're turning into a really growth-oriented city, right? With a good tax base. But then there's really no connection to how it's affecting me, Ellen Crowley, on 5 Morrow Drive. There's really no reinvestment into the repercussions that come from the growth. And I think one of those things is traffic.
Thank you. There's been a couple questions that come in regarding the police. I actually don't know if you're going to know this, but do officers today carry Narcan? And would you be supportive of them doing so if they do not?
I think they do. And I guess I would.
Excellent. I'm going to assume that most people know what that is, but just in case they don't, that is a treatment for somebody who has overdosed, and it provides them some pretty well documented life-saving measures. For anyone who isn't familiar with what Narcan did, for the person who asked that question, if you know for sure that the police don't carry it, drop me a note.
Me too.
And we can talk more about that, but I think it sounds like they do, and certainly Ellen is supportive of it. And
I'm concerned that we wouldn't know that. So if someone has, I'm concerned that we don't know.
Okay. Somebody asked the question, given the recent pass of the library, and I think they're referring specifically to former director and a lot of the issues we had around treatment of employees, and a lot of questions and things that happened there, and issues with trustees, and a whole lot of a big can of worms that we happened there. The question is, given all that, how do we ensure that the library continues to improve and offer services and resources our city needs, and treats its employees fairly on an ongoing basis?
That is a great question. And so many things could have been done better. As soon as there was an inkling of mistreatment or hostile work environment, the mayor should have sent in a mediator immediately to really protect the workers. Anyways, so moving forward, I would love to see a board of trustees that is qualified, experienced, and also remain autonomous to management of the library. I will remain a supporter of the library. If the autonomy cannot be restored back to the library as having supervision of the director, then I will find ways to create that by the executive branch of Woburn. But to make sure it doesn't happen again is to keep talking about the fact that it did happen, and to look at the ways in which Woburn failed the librarians, look at the way that administration fumbled and failed at leadership, and to create an environment that is going to be supportive of librarians, educate the public as to the importance of what a library is, and just use it as a learning experience to make sure these things are not acceptable in Woburn. And it says a lot about how we treat our labor force. It says a lot about how we treat, I always equate the library with freedom of speech. And so that's just me. But it really says how we treat the Woburn Public Library is how we treat people. And so if you allow this thing to happen while you sit at City Hall, you're not doing your job well.
Thank you. There's been a couple questions came in that were really around issues of curriculum. So there's been some questions around things like critical race theory or other things. And I don't think this is a forum to debate that. And I'm also sensitive to your role in the school committee. So I don't want you to put you in an uncomfortable position that way. That is unfair. But I do think as we can ask the question, as a mayor, how would you involve the community in discussions around things like this or other topics that may arise where families have different points of view and feel strongly that they want to be heard and expressed?
Yeah, bring it. I mean, if you have a question about whether it's critical race theory is being taught in public schools, then you have a right to question that. You have a right to go to the school committee meeting and ask. You have a right to request what your child being taught. This is a public education owned by the people. So I would support a transparent government. And, I intend to be at school committee meetings, so I will help the school committee navigate politically hot issues. Because sometimes the school committee isn't always, I work full-time for the city. I will work full-time for the city when I'm mayor, and I will be the mayor and I will be the leader. And if I need, and I will have their back, even though they don't really need it.
Thank you for answering that. So there's been a couple questions that sort of come in the same vein, which is I really support increased things like police funding and school funding and recreation funding. All of that funding starts to sound expensive, which seems to translate into my taxes go up.
Yes.
We and at the same time we just talked about wanting an affordable Woburn.
Yeah.
How do you, as mayor, envision balancing those naturally in conflict?
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate that question because, again,
by the way, that was some of my emphasis in there. Right?
Okay.
The funding, money. They didn't quite ask it that way, but you get the idea. So
I am not going. There's not going to be a need to raise property taxes. Property taxes are going up because the homeowner, the housing value is going up, so your tax is going up. But I see no need for a Proposition 2.5 because we hire like a couple more police officers, or we get a grant to put a sexual assault expert inside the police station, or we decide that the school should get a 3.95 budget and not a 3.8. A lot of the things, some of the stagnation in Woburn is based on just not spending free cash and not actually spending money that is supposed to be spent on services in the city. And again, I do not, there's no way that the culture in Woburn and the city council would support like an overhaul and millions of dollars into initiatives that are targeted exactly what the city needs. So I'm not afraid of any rise in property taxes because of funding roads, like just doing the things that the city is normally supposed to be doing.
Excellent, thank you for that. Let's talk about budget process for a minute, specifically around schools. So a couple questions have come in that have asked what the school budget process might look like in your administration that may be different than what it looks like in the current administration.
So I'll say this again, that the school committee is the greatest people. And I think that I can't say enough good things about them. And I'm just so happy that I have the experience of working with the school committee. And I totally trust their judgment in developing a budget, but I'm going to be available early on to really hear what is popping up. So right around now, actually, we start hearing things like, oh, we might need this. Like last night, the school committee meeting, we're talking about needing more intensive behavioral support. And yet, where was the mayor? So it's important to in the fall, like now, hear from the school committee as to what they might be projecting in terms of meeting the needs of the kids in 2022. So I will just be present. I'll be more collaborative. The conversations about the budget will be happening in public. So the mayor will be held accountable, be held accountable for what I say and what the direction of the school is going. And we used to have this back and forth with the mayor, but he stopped coming to school committee meetings until like the last minute. And so it loses its effectiveness and really trying to sell the message of the schools and improving the schools when we're just under this weird thing.
You trailed off there for a second, Ellen. I could see you were thinking. So let's talk about this question is specific to the Disabilities Commission that came in, but I actually think it applies in many other places, which is many places across Woburn, including, as this person points out, the Disability Commission. We have wonderful human beings who are serving our community. I will note that is a little editorial addition of mine, but I think it's important. But our commissions or committees, in some cases, our staff don't reflect the diversity of our residents. And the question is, how would you, first of all, do you agree? And if you agree, what would you do to modify this?
Yeah, I think the best thing that we need, that the mayor has, is appointment power. And I think that is such a potential to expand the diversity of people serving on boards. If you are talking about how to integrate folks from that speak Haitian Creole, Brazilian Portuguese, or Spanish, then you really need to have people to reflect that language inclusion piece. So either, I was thinking about maybe asking everybody to reapply for a board, and then really just seeing who's really committed, and then just creating new ones, creating new task forces, like a task force based truly on diversity, equity, and inclusion. People on the Disabilities Commission, it would be helpful if they had experience with having impacted by a disability, but it's not necessary. I actually want just a freedom of ideas. Conservative people might consider me to be like not conservative, but people that consider themselves to be conservative, I want them. I want just different ideas, veterans. It's the people want to serve Woburn. They're desperate to. They really want to be part of the government. And I just think we just need to open up that door, and amazing things are going to happen.
Thank you for that. There's so many questions. I don't know which one to ask next, Ellen. So I'm trying to group them together in a little bit of a way. I'm not necessarily succeeding at doing that, but I want to talk about athletics at the middle school in particular, but even at the high school and definitely at the elementary school. We have, football and baseball, and we have some of basketball and some of the things you might expect. But we certainly don't have a lot of structured programs at the middle school level for sure. And even at the high school level, we don't have JV teams for some of the less newer sports, maybe not even newer sports, but sports that aren't quite as big. And so the question that's come in is, do we need to do anything about that?
Yes.
And if so, what?
Yes. So I love this city very much. And this is why I'm running for mayor. But sometimes things are a little bit antiquated. And back in the day, the idea of child wellness was to play sports, right? So when kids had out of school time, we created these great sports teams because that was the way in which kids engaged and became mentally well. That was the idea. But now we know that there are different kinds of kids, and different kids have different interests. So in middle school, programming is like one of my things. So I have things, and middle school programming is one of them, because it's that age where they may not be wanting to go to after school programming anymore, and they're not yet ready for high school sports. And so we really need to target this population and diversify the programming. So music, STEAM activities, robotics and things of that. But I want to partner with organizations that might be able to take middle school students, right? That's free. Or like I said, I'm looking into after school programming, and I'm not making it. I'm not shy about that. I'm looking into after school programming, and specifically for K through 8. So the answer to that question is yes! Exclamation point.
Yes, yes, yes. And, it strikes me that I remember at one point, I think it was middle school, when one of the kids had a real interest in track, and there wasn't a track team or anything going on, and they sort of, with I think their parents' very active help and support, kind of created a club, which I know is not the same thing as a structured sport, but they addressed it. So I love hearing about middle school in particular, because that is sort of a little bit of a lost spot for a lot of young people, but also our infrastructure hasn't been built out as much there. So talking about infrastructure, there's a lot of growth happening in Woburn in many, many ways, and we've talked a little bit about that. But an area that feels underdeveloped, to the person who's asked this question, actually came in a couple of different ways, is Woburn Center. Woburn Center has had some great new restaurants and stores come in, but overall it kind of looks the same as always. And they're asking about revitalization.
Yeah, I think Woburn Center should be revitalized. I think there's a study out there that was done to look at Woburn Center. But when people come into Woburn, once we have a new mayor and we have a new administration, people are going to be very interested in Woburn. And I believe, honestly, that we can create a tourism in Woburn. We can create a very vital Woburn Center. And I actually think that when I'm elected, it's going to be like, I'm going to create just a fresh new vision, and people are going to be interested and they want to come here and go to our restaurants, because we're going to be helping the small businesses on the Woburn Center, and we're going to be looking at beautification. We're going to be innovating programs to pick up the trash in Woburn Center. And then we will engage in long-term planning as to how to make Woburn Center look better and beautify it, make it look like a place that we can all be proud of. So I am 100% behind Woburn Center revitalization. But in the meantime, there's just little things that we can do to really make Woburn shine. And it's gonna be really good.
Good. Let's talk about health mandates. There's been a couple of questions that come in and ask this in a variety of ways, but I think at the heart of the questions is, what's your stance on that mandatory mandates? None of the people asking the question specifically were calling out the COVID vaccine, but I imagine they're thinking about things like that: mandatory testing, flu shots, other health protection mechanisms, masks. Sort of overall, what's your perspective on how we handle those things and how we communicate those things?
So I support I voted for the mask mandate in school. I didn't vote for it during the summer. I thought that in the summer the environment was different, but I do support unvaccinated children and vaccinated adults teaching those children to keep mask mandates. I was in favor of that. I don't like mandates in general because as a lawyer, it just feels like it's a litigation creator. But if there's an uptick in cases and people are starting to be positive, and our positivity rate and hospital rate goes up, and we're starting to see some concerning signs, then I probably will revisit that. But for now, I generally just don't like mandates because of the for the city side, because it just creates a suppression.
So let's talk about sort of part two of that question was often whether it's a mandate or a recommendation, how do we encourage residents to comply with things that are designed for the greater good, but might be uncomfortable or frustrating for some people?
So again, leadership, I think I wear a mask when I'm in a place with unvaccinated people. I wear a mask out in public. I think just demonstrating that as being important, just letting people that may not agree with that always be heard, and not create a place where there's just one right answer. I guess if we needed to do a mandate, there's nothing wrong with actually setting up a conversation about it and hearing from people before such mandate is imposed, right? So if the time comes, it's February, I'm mayor, and I'm thinking, look, I think we need a mask mandate. I would probably ask people just for their feedback to see how people are feeling about it. I think I lost your question. Oh, so how we would promote that just through education and the whole "we are in this together," I think is really important. Promoting, that idea, that community feel that Woburn has.
Thank you. Going back, you inspired one person in our audience when you started talking about the downtown. They said that they're envisioning, a big stretch of time from the commons, sort of hourly down the library with sidewalk chessboards and checkerboards and hopscotch on the sidewalks. When you think about revitalization, their question is, are you thinking about things like that, or do you have other thoughts in mind?
I like the idea of benches and green spaces and thriving small businesses. I have not thought more about hopscotch and things like that, but the maybe best thing about redesigning Woburn Center is that what a way to pull in the community and hear from everybody. Imagine if the mayor had, as mayor, I called a meeting in like June just to hear from people their ideas about what they want to see from Woburn Center. So one of the things that one of my things is public art. And when I first started running for mayor, I was like, I'm going to talk about public art all the time, but then obviously more things were important. But public art has so many advantages to the community, and there are so many grants available if we wanted to do like a public mural that really reflected Woburn, and then we could have the schools involved and kids could vote on what they want to see in a mural. I mean, it just makes you so excited. So I think the only thing that's coming to me right now is benches, grass, and a mural.
Hey, we like benches, grass, and murals, right? That's awesome. One of the questions that came in before this evening, they sent me a note saying that at school committee, which I did not have an opportunity to attend last night, that they said that there was 29% of families consented for test and stay.
Yes.
And they thought that was low, disappointingly low was their words. Wanted to get a sense from you how you felt about that, and what, if anything, you would, basically, how do you feel about that? Is that good? Is that bad? And if it's bad, what do we do to change that? And actually, Ellen, if I might stop you, I'm sorry. It might be helpful for those folks who are unclear about what test and stay means, because I actually have seen quite a lot of discussion about this where I'm not sure it's actually clear everybody understands it. If you could start by just clarifying that policy and then talking about your opinion on it.
So test and stay is an option that if your child is not a wicked close contact, sort of close contact.
Yeah, Massachusetts came out with that one. You're wicked.
And again, on the top of my head, because it's one of those things that I think I get it, and then it's a whack-a-mole and I don't, but 3 to 6 feet, if you were a close contact and you were 3 to 6 feet, you have the option of coming to school, but testing every day. So your kid in the class and you hear that you were a close contact, but you were 3 to 6, you can still come to school. So yeah, I love it because kids are still coming to school, and that takes away from kids losing in-person instruction. However, parents not participating in it is their right. And if they're not doing test and stay, that means that their child is staying home, and that's a choice that the parent is making. So I think it's disappointing I think in the sense that 29% of people would only be our pool, hypothetically, if we did pool testing, then we would only be able to pool test 30% of the kids in the school. And so I think that's disappointing. It's not necessarily disappointing to me that only 29% participate in pool testing, because maybe the parents are being extra safe.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Excellent. Let's talk about a couple of those school things.
Yep.
A few questions that come in asking about what is the criteria or what needs to happen in order for you to feel comfortable voting for the revoking of mask mandates at the school? What things have to be in place for that to happen?
Revoking the mask mandate.
Well, assuming the state doesn't have one, I assume, I mean, I think it's safe to assume we can't break the Massachusetts law. So if I'm assuming it's,
yeah, no, I get it.
Woburn specific.
I would say we would have a plan in place for outside instruction. I would like to see kids under the age of 12 get vaccinated. I would like to see a high percentage of vaccination rate, and those would probably be the factors, and a low positivity rate, of course. So if it stays this low, we get more people vaccinated, and then we have other mitigating layers of protection, then I would probably consider it.
Mm-hmm. Another sort of somewhat related question, I don't think it's necessarily a mask question, but it's certainly a school question. There are many families who benefited and had a positive experience with virtual learning last year. There are many who didn't. But this question is, are you opposed to a virtual learning or remote learning option come in? Now, they didn't specify whether that's an ongoing basis or as an as-needed basis if I need to stay home for 2 weeks. But in general, how do you think about virtual learning?
I mean, I think it's, first of all, I would never vote for it. I like in-person instruction. So if I was ever given the choice to go for in-person versus virtual, I will always go for in-person. However, I like the concept of providing an alternative education for some learners in some regards. It's just really, really expensive, and we would have to invest in a lot of staffing to make it happen. And if fiscal issues was my only barrier, then I mean that's the only barrier I see to creating a good virtual program. I think DESE should be looking, quite frankly, at creating more virtual learning academies besides the 2 that they have. I'm not sure why they're not on that. Seems like it would be a good endeavor, but I'm not against it. I think it could provide some support for kids that are out of school for various reasons. So I'm game.
This is not a question, but I want to share it because it's a follow-up to the test and stay discussion that we had. A couple of people have said, we only got email notices. Maybe we should send home paper notices in multiple languages. That might increase that awareness of that program. Again, not a question.
Oh, test and stay.
Yeah,
we're not.
Did I say? I probably said something.
Oh, okay.
So test and stay. Yes, specifically.
I'm like, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and there's actually quite a few people who are sort of saying yes, and I'm bombarded and by emails, and I forget to revisit it. So again, just feedback to respond. Question for you. How do you feel about term limits for local officials in Woburn?
I like the idea. I'd like to explore it. The problem we might run into is that not a lot of people run for election in Woburn. So we have people that keep spots because there's not a lot of competition, which I think that's just the way things are. I would have to think about it. Full disclosure, my father was on the school committee for 40 years, so I'm sure he would have passed some sort of term limit, and now I'm on the school committee for 8. So in some ways, you become more experienced, you become more savvy, you use your reputation that you develop for good. So I could see some good parts, but that's a tough question. Think about it.
Yeah, it is. Thank you for thinking a little bit about that and sharing sort of your at least initial response.
I am Scott Galvin's term limit, by the way.
Elections are term limits in some ways, right? That's what these things are. Follow up on the mask question. For those folks who, this is their words, not mine, refuse vaccination or mask.
Yes.
How should the community respond to those things?
How should the community respond? With understanding and compassion, or
I think the question, so I'm going to read the question exactly as it is, because it doesn't have a lot of detail and I don't want to misinterpret it, but it says, what if Woburn residents refuse the vaccination mask? So I think that I'm guessing, and the person who posted that, feel free to respond in the chat with more clarity about what you're looking for there. But I think generally speaking, if someone refuses to participate in a mask or vaccination mandate, what happens to them?
Like criminalizing it or something?
Well, maybe we start with what is the school policy today, right?
Schools.
It didn't specify schools, but that was the context by which we were talking about it. So let's.
Well, all right. If we develop a law about mask mandates, vaccination mandates would be tough because you would need to carve out exceptions for religious and medical issues. It's just the way that I think that works, body integrity wise. So if we create a law that there is a mandate, if there's a new variant comes and where the people are at risk and the city council wants to enact a law, I don't think it should come from the mayor as an executive order, but if they're wanting to work with the city council, create some sort of ordinance, it would have to be fair. It would have to be a well-level, thought-out law that wouldn't necessarily negatively impact people. You'd have to be fair.
Let me give an example that's outside the school system that might illustrate this. We know in some of our neighboring cities, there is actually a mask mandate the city has put in place for indoor spaces. I think Winchester and I know a few others have them.
Yes.
I don't actually know what their enforcement policies are, other than being good citizens. I don't know what them is, but should there be enforcement of things like that?
Creating a fine or a crime out of it would seem to use a lot of police power to do that. And I would have to really think about that. And having a civil fine, I don't like civil fines as a poverty advocate, making people pay for things when they don't have it. If we had to enact a mask mandate, just look at what's working in similar cities and seeing what the trends are. That's always an easy way to do things. I understand the question, and I get it that there's a balance of power here about how people feel about their own life and their own decisions and the power of the government. And I get that completely because I'm a lawyer. So I understand this issue very clearly. It's tough. It's a tough question to answer when I don't even know if I would even do the law, and I don't even know what I would do to attach to it. I don't know. I have to think about it.
Well, we ask lawyers questions like
this.
It's a very difficult question, but I think the people will raise this question.
Yeah,
it is something that has come up a lot, and I know it's I hesitate. It's not just about this thing, right? It is about sort of how you approach things in the future that we may not anticipate coming up. I want to go back to talking a little bit about diversity across things. We talked about boards and commissions and some of the things that are there.
Yes.
And oftentimes when we talk about diversity, we think about gender or race or cultural background. Those certainly are diverse things, sexuality, but also different points of view and things. And I just want to give you an opportunity to talk about how you approach that community input because we've had a few folks sort of ask questions kind of around that. How do you talked about bringing the community together. How do you facilitate that as a mayor, or envision your administration doing that?
Okay, that is an awesome question, because a mayor candidate can stand up and say, I'm going to contact the community, but how do you reach everyone, everybody, right? So I like that question. If there are, so we would identify the ultimate goal of outreach. If we were, all right, we were trying to do a strategic plan. And so we desperately need to hear from all folks of all voices. So we need to establish that as goal number one. This community study, the strategic plan, will 100% be inclusive. What are the ways in which we can reach all populations, all folks of different backgrounds, people how do we get diverse thinkers? How do we access them? And so we could somehow use the religious folks, right? And make connections there. We can use the school system, as we know. We can use the library, right? We can reach people. We can find people that speak different languages. But it is possible, because if there's one qualification I have is that I've been absolutely seeped in diversity, equity, and inclusion my entire career. So I've represented people of all backgrounds. I have represented refugees from Afghani. I have represented people born without eyes. I've represented people that have been through awful situations and walked alongside them. And so I am comfortable, and I know how to reach people. If I have any strengths, it's that one.
Thank you.
Just that one.
You talked about a lot of things tonight, Ellen, not just that one. With the growth that we have had in the city, and we talked about sort of a tracker piece of it, but there's been a question that's come in around schooling and
yes.
How we, assuming with growth comes more families. It's hard to predict how many that's going to be necessarily, but how do we stay on top of that? And if we need additional schooling structure and infrastructure, how do we handle that? And how do we make sure that our schools are equitable in the resources that they get? That was like 8 questions
yes.
in one.
So here we go. All right. We build more schools, right? And I noticed in the mayor's strategic plan, by now we should have had a new elementary school, the combination of Linscott and Alta Vista. That was on the plan. So I looked this morning and I didn't see one. But I think we need to understand the city and the school committee need to work together to understand and have a very strong plan for growth. So we need to collaborate, and the school committee is doing its own growth study, and we're going to have some data to be able to plan for the schools. One idea that I have, which we could do, is to create an early childhood education center. So we take a building and we put some kindergarten, maybe not all, in a building with the preschool. And so it has its own independent space, which happens in a lot of school systems. And that would, of course, free up tons of space in various schools. We could redistrict, and I will say it, yes, redistrict. And we could look at ways in which we do that very equitably, so that we're not just moving, because I represented a group of families once where the city was redistricting schools, and lo and behold, they were redistricting a lot of the EL poverty impacted families. And so I would avoid that. And then making sure that the redistricting plan is built from the top up. So we start with kindergarten, so no one's impacted, because we would absolutely 100% avoid a child moving from one school to the other. That creates some risk of educational harm. So A is we study growth. B, we consider early childhood education. 3, we redistrict. 4, we build schools. We get, if we have to, we get portable classrooms. But as I sit here, it may surprise people that we've actually lost enrollment at the Woburn Public Schools, and where we were 2 years ago. We're not there now. So we're actually, it doesn't mean it's not on my agenda. It absolutely is. It's just a fact out there, and that could be COVID related, private school related type of thing. But again, we just need a plan, and we need to identify to the public, this is the triggering point where we're going to be taking action.
Thank you.
Yes.
Question came in, and this is a hard one to answer. I know we talked a little bit about it when we got together last week, but I think it's a good and important question. There's a lot to invest in our city. If you had to pick a top 2 priorities that need the most immediate attention, this asks what it would be. And if you can't answer that, maybe how would you approach identifying what those most urgent needs are?
Okay. So I didn't want to say it, but a strategic plan. We need a strategic plan. We need to bring in a consulting firm to help us do the stuff that I had just mentioned that I'm really good at. And we need to have someone guide that conversation and bring in as many people as possible and do as marketing as possible. And our money would be, I am convinced that we actually can get a consulting firm to do this for free, because it's so important. And we're going to be doing such great things for diversity, equity, and inclusion that I think we need, capital N, strategic plan. The second thing, I have to go with roads. I have to go with creating inclusionary spaces in our roads. I have to look at road repair, sidewalks. I can't. So I met a constituent in North Woburn, and early on in my campaign, and this person was on a walker and living alone. And the output I got from this person was that they lived alone and they couldn't leave their house, and they were very isolated. And I looked at the sidewalk surrounding this person's house, and I realized that this person not able to use their walker, walk down the street. So I have been emotionally struggling with that interaction. And I asked because I'm in my work, I do a lot of risk assessment with a lot of counsel and interviewing. And I did a risk assessment on this person, and I felt very concerned about his well-being. Sidewalks, long answer.
Okay. Helpful answer. It's good to know how you're thinking about it. So thank you for that. Question came in, are new middle schools on the list for your future, should you be elected?
Yeah, when we think about building new schools, that's an excellent question. Thank you. It's either Linscott, Alta Vista, Joyce Kennedy. one of the things. I have to say that I'm not in favor of combining to make one mega middle school. I would need a lot of convincing for that to be educationally sound. And of course, the school committee would be the experts in that regard with the superintendent. I was at a very large middle school, and it was in a similar town, and the feel of it was extreme. So I'm not quite sold on combining middle schools. And I know that the mayor told somebody that was his plan. I don't know if that's official. I'm only the chair of the school committee. So I haven't been sold on that yet. I think that all the 4 schools are priorities, and we just need to do which one is the most, and we're doing a feasibility study, by the way. So this isn't going to be like school committee walking through and looking at things. We're actually going to have someone tell us what the priorities should be. Yeah.
I'm going to add one more to your list of schools to have input onto. So Northeast Metro Tech is our technology, hands-on school. It is not run by Woburn, but it is funded by all the 12 or 13 or whatever many cities spend. It is due to be rebuilt, and they have asked all communities for funding. Some have already given their answer, Woburn, to the best of my knowledge, has not. Would you support the financial support that they are seeking? I know it doesn't come, just to be clear, doesn't come out of our school meeting for Debbie. So it's not like we're taking money away from Woburn Public Schools to contribute.
I can't imagine a situation where I wouldn't support that. I mean, these are Woburn kids going to this school that have opted for this education, and I have to know how much it is, though.
I actually don't know the amount, nor did the person who entered the question.
Yeah, I think it's a lot, though.
It's significant. It's not insignificant.
Yeah.
I know that it is a shared cost, so it's not like building the entire school, but it is a significant investment. As personally, just as a mom of a kid who went there, I will just say this: the building does need updating, kind of like our Joyce and Kennedy, and I know those are tough choices all the way around. This is a question for me, but I'm really curious. Was there ever a time, Ellen, I know you grew up in Woburn, was there ever a time you were tempted to leave Woburn? And if there was, what kept you there? How could you ever think of such a thing? I know.
Tempted to, no. We can make the city better. In all fairness, you go to Lexington and they're, purchasing houses with their community. Oh God, what is it? Community Preservation Fund money. And then they're using those as low income houses. And I see those innovative things, and it makes me a bit envious. But anyways, I love Woburn. I'm dedicated to Woburn, and I think that this has amazing potential. And no, I've never been tempted by the fruit of another.
Please break out in song now, Ellen, for us. I'm very tempted to have my devices in the room play that. I won't make you dance.
Plus, my father is listening to this and would be like shocked if I ever suggest that question, or my mom.
Oh, that's too fun. This is not a question, so I'm going to just, for the person who posted this in June, you posted this publicly, so I'll just say this: we failed to pass CPA 3 times. I don't know, Ellen, do you want to comment on that?
No, I know. So I have to abide by the way in which Woburn voted, and I voted for the Community Preservation Act. No, in my first year of being mayor, it's probably not a useful use of time to try to get that passed again. But in certain time, if we start doing other things, then maybe it will become more attractive to people. But the Community Preservation Act is basically, it allows Woburn to raise taxes just percentage, and we take that money and the state matches that money. So towns that passed it have millions and millions of dollars to work on affordable housing and open space. And so, but Woburn didn't pass it. And so I deeply respect that as that's done. That was democracy. That was a vote by the people. So, but we do have an affordable housing count, which we are supposed to spend it on low income housing. So we have our own money that we have raised.
So this is a really great, Maria, thank you for your comment. That I'm so glad it's been informative, and I'm deeply appreciative, Ellen, taking the time.
Oh, you're welcome.
But there's also a question that came in, which I think is really great, and I'm so glad that somebody asked this, because we should probably start here. Why did you decide to run for mayor?
So, well, I have a certain enthusiasm and skill set, and I looked at the current city government, and I said, I can make some changes there. I am an incredibly effective person, and I think that I'll make an excellent mayor. I actually think I'm going to be the best mayor that Woburn has ever had, because I am going to just be empowered by the people. Like, I am going to be the people's mayor. I am going to be very interactive with the public. I'm going to listen to them. And so people will feel like they have a say in their government. And I'm not going to be I'm not going to make all the decisions in my office without consulting with people. And I think it's going to feel a lot different. And I really feel that I saw some missed opportunities from Mr. Galvin in the past couple of years. And I just think it's time for change.
Excellent. Somebody posted a question. If you send questions to Ellen, please either send them to everyone or send them to me, Samantha. I can't see Ellen's feed. I want to make sure in the last few minutes we have your questions get asked. So yes, please, if you send things directly to Ellen and not to me.
I'm not reading them.
Ellen is not looking at them and I can't see them. So please send them our way. I did have a couple questions that came in given what we were just talking about hearing neighbors, I can't help but ask this one next, which is, when was the last time the planning board denied a project based on neighbors' concerns? Now, I don't know that you'll be able to answer that question, but I think the heart of what they're getting at is your philosophy on acting on community input, particularly around permitting and planning, is the nature of this, and a couple other questions that came in.
So it's funny, when you said that, for whatever reason, I got a little emotional, because people are going to their planning board and saying, this is going to negatively impact me. And now the question has become literally a hypothetical, because it's silly to think that there would ever be person-based decision-making. And I don't really know the planning board, they seem like nice people, but I think it's from the top down. It's this idea that perhaps the mayor has a plan and he wants people to abide by it. But I think if we start thinking planning boards, so it'd be really cool to have on a planning board is an environmentalist, right? To really ask the right questions. And I do think there is there's some pushback in some regard on the planning board, but diversity.
Awesome, thank you for that. I'm gonna just verbally let you know we're almost out of time. I do have a couple more questions to ask, but if you have anything else that you have either sent to Ellen or has been spurred and inspired by the conversation right now, please do send it to me or to everyone so that we can make sure and try and get it in here before we have to wrap up. It is almost my bedtime. And I know all of you have been super wonderful about participating with us and asking really important and valuable questions. So I thank you for that. So there's a general question here about the words of this person, eyesores in the city. There are some parts of our city, earlier we talked about some public spaces like the schools, but they're not all public spaces. Underdeveloped, vacant, things that are not well maintained. As mayor, how would you address that?
So again, beautification and making sure that Woburn looks good is not just a aesthetic thing, it's actually a fundamental aspect of a city. So when we go to open spaces and it's littered with trash, especially in a city that has such a rich history of suffering, of children suffering because of pollution, because of carelessness of our environmental spaces, is honestly disturbing to me. So when I think of beautifying Woburn, I actually think of creating a committee or making it a priority. So we're looking at all the different spaces and saying, how can we make this better? And it's probably also helpful to fund the Parks Department. That's probably a good thing to do. But really, again, inventorying all of these spaces, identifying what the needs are, and then making a plan to make them better. And we really have to pick up the trash. I mean, Again, the one thing that I am hearing from people, and it's a very visceral reaction, is the way they feel when they look at our public spaces, when they look at our streets. There's this imagery that two different people have said that they're driving from Reading into Woburn, and they're in Reading, and then they're in Woburn, and it's completely different. All of a sudden, things are on the ground. litter all over the place, and you can feel the difference. And so it pains me because we have this history, and we're not cherishing the memory of these kids.
Another really important question has come in, which is, as mayor, what would your vision be for accessibility and advocacy on behalf of students with disabilities whose needs are not being addressed by the city agencies, departments, such as housing and education? You certainly talked about road infrastructure and sidewalks, but when we think more broadly about the needs of that community, what do you envision?
A robust overturn of what's been happening, I guess, if people are systematically being discriminated from city entities, that needs to stop right away. That's against the law. So we need to overturn that, and we need to centralize the complaint department so we know exactly when someone feels that they've been discriminated against by a city entity across any board. And again, when I'm elected, there's going to be a plan to make Woburn more inclusive. It's not going to be like, oh, let's make it more inclusive. No, it's like, we're going to have action steps. And even the city emails are going to say Woburn does not discriminate against all of the categories of people. And it's funny because I mentioned something online. I said, I forget what it was. It said something about I'm going to promote the rights of folks with disabilities and promote more inclusion. And I used the word disability. So I separated dis from ability. And someone said, no, I like the word disability. That's how I identify myself. And I said, oh, all right. Well, I just wanted to be more sensitive in my language. And so right in that little instance, this intelligent person told me that I think it was a she, this person prefers this label, this way of speaking. And I just think we need to have more conversations like that.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ellen. We just have a couple more minutes, and I want to thank everyone who's participated in this session live and given us incredible questions, both before and email and Facebook messages and things to me, and actively participated in our discussion here today. I really believe that transparency in government is important. It's why I've hosted today in Woburn. It's all about helping the community have ask questions and get answers to them. And I thank you for spending an hour and a half with us doing that here tonight. And I respect that I have neither filtered those questions nor you saw them ahead of time. And so that's not easy, and I appreciate that you've taken the time to do that. In the last couple of minutes that we have, Carolyn, I just want to give you an opportunity to address the audience and wrap up with any closing remarks.
So I first just want to thank the Woburn Public Media for just hosting this. I obviously want to thank Samantha Stone for graciously taking the time to ask me questions. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. And if I miss something, or if you need clarification, please reach out, because there's so much information. There's so many things that I want to do for the city that it's tough to encapsulate it into a Zoom call. And I think that this election, again, is truly going to set us on a different path, and we can become the city that we're supposed to be. I am just grateful for the support that I've had from voters, hopefully voters, people in the city that have supported my campaign, that have criticized me, that have called me, that have allowed me a little lawn space for my sign. And I'm just really grateful to have this opportunity. I feel very blessed to be here. And of course, I want to thank my family for just, being awesome. And I just vote for me. I promise that I will do everything I can to make Woburn what it should be. I make a pledge to you that you'll always be heard, and you may not always agree with me, but I promise I'll always be transparent. And I'll never be the type of mayor that's in the office making decisions. I'll be out in the community. You will hear from me, and you'll be able to know exactly what's going on. And that's it. So again, thank you. And thank you everybody for coming. And do you have a last question for me, or?
I don't have a last question
Okay.
for you, Ellen. I never not have a question. Like that kind of heard of. I guess I reached my threshold, but I just want to end this conversation the way I end every Today in Woburn episode, which is to remind Woburn, please continue to take good care of each other.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.